Alright folks, if future me has split the videos up like I intended to, this is going to be the start of part 2 on our chipper truck. We're going to start with the transmission. It's in bad shape. So when I drove it initially, sorry I don't have any video of that, third gear sounds like a, it sounds like a rock crusher. So I took the seat loose. Oh. And then these Fords have a huge, you can't even see it, they have a great big access panel in the floor that you can pull out, which I have done. And I actually took the top off the transmission and looked down inside third gear. It's missing some pieces out of the teeth, so the transmission's got to come out. No two ways about it. Shouldn't be that bad of a job. The only real catch is that it has a PTO, so we'll have to deal with that. Anyway, I've got the front end up on some 4x4s just to give us a little extra clearance underneath. Once the transmission is out, we can look at the exhaust. It's leaking from the elbow behind the turbo that runs down, whatever you want to call that, the downpipe or whatever. Also, the slipping clutch, I just adjusted that. No big deal there. So I don't think we have to put a clutch in it. We just need to fix the transmission. All right, first things first, we'll get this brace out of here. Good thing is this truck came from down south, so it doesn't seem to be too crusty underneath. We're going to try to pull the transmission with the PTO mounted. Just because it makes such a freaking mess if you try to take them off. Okay. Should take a 3/8 12 point. Oh good, those are loose. Now that's always nice. Okay, now you have to be careful. Like so. Well, normally, rule of thumb, you take the shift tower out first, so you don't get your dirty paw prints all over the inside of the vehicle. But in this case, I had already cheated and taken it out once before, so I don't think it's going to matter. Now we'll put the rag over the top of the transmission just so we don't get any big chunks in it. It doesn't matter, it's got to come apart anyway, but you know, old habits. Don't fall, you sucker. Well, there she is, folks. Finally got it wrestled out of there. I had to jack the front end up and put a second block under it because this chip bed hangs down so low. And then the stupid PTO, the hex shaft won't telescope anymore, so I had to take the U-joint apart in order to get it separated. But it really wasn't too bad. And the nice thing is we can leave the bell housing and everything there since the clutch is, I think, okay. So let's get the top off here and I'll show you what we're dealing with. So right there, that's third gear. And that is going to be our problem. So she definitely sounds a little crunchy going down the road like that. Just at first glance, I don't see any damage to anything else, so I think we might get lucky. That wasn't very smart. That's the stator for the speed sensor. If you're one of these guys that wants to stay clean, don't touch an Eaton Fuller transmission. Ah, these stupid shims, come on. There we go. Wrong. Well, the real third gear carnage is on the counter shaft. So we're missing almost the entire tooth here and a pretty good part of that one. So that'll do it. Gotta get a new cordless impact. The anvil's so worn out on that one that it's causing the sockets to wear out. Well, so far all the bearings look good. It's my lucky day. Well, I don't see a reason to pull the reverse idler or the PTO off at this time. Looks pretty good, really. So I think we're just going to replace the parts that are damaged and put it back together. It won't be a complete rebuild. It'll just be a repair. So we've got to remove each damaged gear from its respective shaft. The counter shaft is definitely the simpler one, so we're going to start with that one. So there's our damaged gear back there. Now the book tells us that there's a snap ring behind this bearing that has to come off before we can press the gears off the shaft. And what it says to do is to cut the cage and remove the rollers, and then you're able to access that little snap ring in the back there. But using my powers of cheapness, I was able to actually sneak in there with a snap ring pliers and kind of finagle it so that it's up out of the groove behind that bearing without damaging the cage. I don't know if you guys can see that snap ring or not. So I'm actually touching it right now. It's right there. But it was back here. So with that popped up, I think we should be able to press that apart. Don't drop it. Don't drop it. Got it. Okay. There's that snap ring. There it is. The problem child. All right, now the real fun starts. So we're going to remove the cap for the 4th gear or 5th gear synchronizer. And there's a needle bearing here, thrust bearing. That's got to come out. And then this whole unit should come off together. These are special snap ring pliers just for this purpose. Because Eaton loves to use these snap rings with no ears. There it is. Right there. Not bad. Now if we were rebuilding this transmission, we'd have to take this whole thing apart, check all the synchros, make sure they're within spec, replace any worn parts. But I drove it. It drives fine, it shifts fine. It just has a little rumble in 3rd gear. Alright folks, we've got parts. Here we go. It's been a week since I pulled this apart, so I may be a little bit rusty. Also, rusty with the camera. I haven't filmed anything for a solid week, which is unusual for me. Anyway, here's the old gear with the damage. Here's the new gear, same part number. Looks the same to me. So we did not remove this roller bearing. We'll leave that right where it is. And it should go on here, clutch side down. Then there's a retaining ring thrust washer, and it lines up with a little ball. You guys probably can't see it, but it's right there. It fits in that groove. Then we'll install 4th gear with its bearing. Now the hub, and it has to go with the smooth side up, not the side with the stamped letters. And the whole synchro as a unit. Then there's a thrust bearing. And then the race is actually attached to the, or it's sitting over there with the input shaft, so we'll get that later. Onto the counter shaft. New gear looks the same to me. So this one just slides on. Roughly. That'll do. That'll do nicely. Alright folks, we are ready to assemble this transmission. I've cleaned up all the parts as best I can, cleaned the gasket surfaces, gone ahead and pressed in new seals for the output shaft and the input shaft. Think we're ready to start putting gears in this thing. So we will start with the counter shaft. I installed the bearing cap with the same shims that came out of it. Now we're checking the end play of the counter shaft. The spec is 2 to 8 thousandths. So I'll just wiggle it back and forth here. And we've got about 2.5, maybe 3 right now, which is good, right in spec. Now I'm going to take this cap back off and we'll seal up the shims before we permanently install it. We'll use some Loctite 515. There's 3 shims on there. I've got 515 between each of them. And then these holes go through the case, so you got to put some sealant on those. I think this guy was down here in this corner. A quick double check of the end play. Right where we were. So that's good. See, my brand new gasket came pre-torn. Come on, stay up there. Well, these bolts are also through, so they have to be sealed up. Well, sorry folks, couldn't film much. We had kind of a madhouse temporarily. They're trying to plant the field next door, and they got flat tires and inexperienced operators, and it's, you know, usual spring craziness. Anyway, I got the rear bearing cap installed, and we have good end play. It's supposed to be, again, 2 to 12 thousandths. And when I put it together, it was right at 12. So I decided to take 6 thousandths worth of shims out, and now we're right about 4 or 5. Oh. You're supposed to tip it up on its nose to check it, the end play vertically. But I think we're close enough. So there is still one shim underneath this cap. And I used the Loctite 515, and then I installed the yoke with a new nut. So that's it. The rolling assembly is done. Alright folks, it looks good, sounds good. I'm happy with the backlash. I don't see too many extra pieces laying in the bottom, so I think we are done. This is a very simple transmission. I'll try to walk you guys through how it works briefly. This is a constant mesh transmission, which means that every gear is constantly in mesh with its mate, as opposed to a sliding gear transmission where the gears, you know, they're offset and then they have to slide together. So the beauty of the constant mesh transmission is that we can use synchronizers to get a nice smooth shift. So the synchronizer is essentially a clutch, so it's just going to push this cone into this cup, and the friction will cause the two halves here, the clutch, the sliding clutch and the gear, to slowly come up to the same speed before it locks in. The negative to the constant mesh transmission is that you lose efficiency because all these gears are constantly spinning all the time. They're also a little bit more difficult to make, so they cost a little bit more. Anyway, first gear and reverse gear are not synchronized in this transmission, so that's this selector here. So as we slide this one forward, now we're in first gear. So power comes in the input shaft, which is not connected to the output shaft. It goes down to the counter shaft, and then this gear right here is locked to the output shaft. So that's our slowest gear. Second gear, we go back to neutral on that one, and then shift this guy back. Now this gear is locked to the output shaft. Third gear, this gear is locked to the output shaft. And you see we keep getting smaller and smaller, so our ratio keeps getting bigger and bigger. Now we're in fourth gear, so this small gear is locked to the output shaft. Now we're in fifth gear, which is direct drive. So the input shaft is now directly connected to the output shaft, and the counter shaft is just along for the ride. Now, a couple of gotchas with this type of transmission. So the oil circulation, the oil level inside this transmission when it's full, it's going to be, I don't know, down about here somewhere. So it relies on the rotation of the counter shaft in order to splash oil all around inside the transmission and keep things lubricated. When you're towing this thing, the input shaft's not turning and the counter shaft's not turning. But if it's in neutral, this output shaft unit spins the whole time. So we're spinning here, but we're not spinning down there. So now we have no oil circulation inside the transmission. That's why when these trucks are towed, they either have to pick up the rear wheels and tow them backwards, or the drive line has to be removed. Otherwise you will burn up the transmission because the bearings that are spinning right now aren't getting lubricated by the splashing of the counter shaft. Pretty tough transmissions and very simple. This is a lot simpler than a Road Ranger transmission where it has dual counter shafts where everything has to be timed. This is pretty simple. Now's when I figure out I forgot to put the drain plug in. Well, this is straight 50 weight oil. That should be about it right there. Well, there's some funkiness with the shift cover. These little shoes, where they bent them over, they're cracked in every corner, but they're all like that. And it doesn't seem to be hurting it at all. And then there's some wear, funky wear on the first and reverse shift fork. I think that sliding clutch has been rocking on there. You can see it's kind of loosey-goosey on there. But I don't think we're going to worry too much about it. Yeah, I know, cover's a little bit scuzzy. I did what I could, but I can only go so far. And let's be honest, if there's anything we know about these Eaton transmissions, is that they rarely break, but they always leak. So give it a couple months, it'll be a big grease ball and nobody will know the difference. Well, before we install the transmission, let's talk about the exhaust.
No exhaust leak.
So the big problem is right here where it connects to the turbo. So it has a Marmon flange, uses this V-band clamp, and it's, yeah, rotted right through, and then it's cracked, I don't know, almost halfway around, and the flange is in bad shape too. So it really needs a downpipe, but it does not exist. The Ford parts guy basically just laughed at me. AP Exhaust does have a listing for it, but it shows 0 in stock. Walker has nothing. So rather than mess around with that, we're gonna make our own, or at least make a patch. So this is 2 3/4 inch pipe. It goes up to, I don't know, 3.5 and then to 4.5 or something like that. Anyway, I had a piece of 2 3/4 inch pipe from another repair. I think it's off of an old Chevy. And I made my own flange and welded it up, kind of ground it down so that I have clearance for this clamp. And it looks pretty good. I think it'll work. The flange on the turbo is in pretty sad shape too, so we may have to use some cement or high temperature silicone or something to seal that up. Anyway, what I think I'm going to do is I'll just cut this all out as much as I think I need to. That's all rotted. And we'll cut this guy off and we'll try to weld it together and see what happens. I think there's room for it to come back a little bit. Like it's far away from the firewall, so anyway, I'm gonna do that. I won't record it. It's probably not gonna go very well. I'll stop short of saying that was easy, but it could have been a lot worse. There's the flange. The new one looks good. I had to add a band-aid here. It's pretty thin in this section right here. That's probably the hottest part of the exhaust. So yeah, I think it'll work. Well, I tell you what, these farmers are in a planting panic. It is absolute chaos around here. Anyway, it's time to install the transmission. Pretty straightforward. It is a pull type clutch, but there's no clutch brake. This is a synchronized transmission, so there's nothing extra to line up. We should be able to just roll it right together. Install the drive shafts and away we go. So I'm not going to record that. It's exactly the opposite of removing the transmission. Plus, I'm kind of tired of tripping over the camera, so I will report back when that is done. All right, folks, it's the following morning. I think we've got the transmission fully installed. There it is. There's the drive shaft with the new strap kit. Got the PTO shaft installed. Got the exhaust all hung back up. Pretty happy with that. I freed up that slip joint in the PTO drive shaft. Hung the carrier bearing. Got this little bracket installed. I think it all looks good. I've got to go up top and install the shift tower and figure out the wiring. I think for right now we're going to leave the brace off. There it is right there that runs between the two fuel tanks. We don't really need it. It's not needed for strength or anything. And the fuel line's been cut, so it serves no purpose. Plus, I just kind of noticed when I was installing the transmission, it actually cut a groove in the bottom of the PTO right into the aluminum casting, so that's not ideal. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's okay. I got the PTO cable, shift cable installed. Everything's cool inside there with the clutch. Looks like the transmission's already leaking, so that's good. Totally normal. Yeah, I think that's everything to do with the transmission. All buttoned up. Where's my light? The worst part of the job, bar none, is this stupid boot on the shift lever. Getting that stupid bezel screwed in underneath the floor mat. It probably takes longer than actually pulling the transmission itself. Anyway, the carpet's it's in bad shape, but you know, what are you gonna do? See if we can sneak this guy out of here. It's kind of fun with no mirrors.